He agreed to go to the police station after the prayer, so I picked him and his son up from his house and we drove to the Irving Police Department where he made a report. On the way to the police station, I asked the young boy about his older brother in the meeting with the board. He was confused and didn't know what I was talking about, and I reiterated the question and I said, your older brother, he met with the board to discuss what happened and they agreed to squash everything. The young boy said to me, I don't have an older brother. Have you figured it out yet? This isn't the same kid. It's victim number 2 out of Allah only knows how many kids. So how many more were there? We'll never know, because some imbecile, or a group of imbeciles, thought that it was okay to squash the issue and let the guy leave the country because the family of one victim reportedly didn't want to bring it to the attention of the police.
If you're a Muslim watching this, I need you to watch this entire video and share it with everyone you know. This is going to be my most important video on my channel ever, because as Muslims, there's no way I'm going to allow us to not address this issue. A Muslim imam exposes a child scandal in Texas in full detail, which is absolutely horrific. And instead of thorough investigations, he gets punished for this, for making the Muslim community's reputation look bad. Maybe I'm furious because as a father, I can't imagine this being my child and things like this being put to the side. And even though in a moment I'm going to play the imam's video testimony and urge everyone to watch this video till the end, I do have to give a disclaimer. These things happen and it's not a Muslim issue. This is not a Christian issue because Christians do this too. This is not an atheist issue because atheists do it too. This is a human issue with toxic, corrupt, sick, twisted individuals. All I'm saying is the fact that he's a Muslim doesn't give any community leaders or organizations to hide this because he's a Muslim. Saving face is not going to fly when we're in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment and we're asked why we didn't expose these scum for what they did. Again, if a Muslim does this, it shouldn't and does not change Islam. It just means we have to expose it for what it is because Islam encourages us to expose these things in the first place and restore justice. We shouldn't fear media repercussion of, oh, Muslim imam caught doing this or that. In a second, I'm going to click play, but just remember, we as Muslims need to take accountability. We failed because we stopped following Qur'an and Sunnah. Fathers fail if they let their wives or daughters be around these male imams too much, not because they're not to be trusted, but at the end of the day, they're still men. Does the fact that they're an imam or they're pious all of a sudden free them from desires in just being a male? Mothers fail if they let their little girls, their daughters, have male friends because, oh, they're too young and they're too innocent. Parents fail if they don't let their kids get married because, oh, my little Fatima could never have desires and she doesn't need to get married, she's too young. Let's put her through public education to get a PhD. The Ummah shames polygyny and makes halal difficult, which is why these things are increasing, because in a sec I'm going to expose how the perp was in all these promiscuous secret interactions with women. Without further ado, timestamps are going to be in the description box down below. Let's dive into it.
Some of you may be asking, who is this and why are they showing up in my feed? I promise you this is not what this page is about or going to be about, but this is something that I've been burdened with and have been wanting to get off of my chest for the past 5.5 years. In the fall of 2018, I was working as an imam and the director of outreach for the Islamic Center of Irving, one of the largest Islamic centers in the country. While I was on vacation in the mountains of Colorado, I received multiple missed phone calls from a community member, and upon returning, they stated that they urgently needed to speak with me. After returning from vacation, I met with him on that Thursday, and he explained to me how he witnessed an elderly man inappropriately touching a child at the center, and when he got up to confront the man, he ran away. Later that day or the next, the community member witnessed a teenager threatening the same old man for touching his younger brother. The community member explained how the confrontation was stopped, and that he, along with the older brother of the victim, family members of the perpetrator, met with members of the board to discuss the situation. During this meeting, the events were discussed, and the board members were presented with a picture of the victim who had a golf ball-sized bruise on his cheek from where the old man was forcibly sucking on it. In some twisted manner, either by fear, manipulation, or incredible stupidity, it was agreed that this matter would be squashed, and that the family would be given a few days to get the elderly man back to Pakistan. After being informed of the situation, I requested as much evidence as I could from the witness, who also provided me with the picture which showed the clear evidence of the abuse. It just so happened that the following day would be our congregational prayers, for which I was scheduled to deliver the sermon. The next morning I went directly to the police department where I reported everything that I knew. I then went to the Islamic Center where I delivered the sermon, which subsequently went viral, exposing the issue to the community and denouncing the actions of the board. After my sermon, the president of the institution grabbed the microphone to calm everyone down. He explained how he appreciated me and my efforts to bring these types of issues to the attention of the community. He confirmed that they knew of this incident and that they did their own investigation, that they brought it to the attention of the parents who did not want to inform the police. He tried to state how this was just a big misunderstanding and how I didn't have all of the information and so it didn't exactly happen the way that I had related it. This narrative was later used as part of the smokescreen to present the idea that this was just some sort of cultural misunderstanding. He stated how there would be no repercussions against me for bringing this issue to the community. My sermon, along with his reaction, were all streaming live and uploaded to both Facebook and YouTube. It was almost immediately deleted and then miraculously uploaded again to a community activist organization's Facebook page called Face. It was then put into a shortened and condensed version which went viral on Facebook, and then the full version version again was uploaded on YouTube. The next day I was put on administrative leave and I was told not to come back to the center. After about 2 months, eventually I was told to come back to the center, but that I was to stay in my office and to not interact with the community. After a short period of time, I was told that I no longer had to come into work. I was officially let go and my contract expired. Throughout this process, there was next to no support, locally or nationally, from anyone in the community of any meaningful value. Sure, there was a hashtag campaign, I stand with Imam Nick, but hashtags are about as good as cotton in a barn fire when what was needed was a fire hose. Unfortunately, the Muslim community was more concerned with saving face than doing the right thing. Notable Muslim leaders and organizations were silent, and some of your most beloved so-called leaders actively tried to get me to go along to get along. A hit piece was put out against me on muslimmatters.org. I was attacked in the comment sections of social media posts and on podcasts on YouTube. All because we don't want people to think bad of us, even if it came at the expense of truth and justice. I want to be clear, this silencing effort wasn't the actions of just everyday average Muslims who probably felt helpless in this situation. But I'm referring to the so-called Muslim leadership, specifically those most prominent figures who resided locally and met with me privately with other individuals to encourage me to make up with the board and continue on as normal. To this day, I find it absolutely absurd that you have individuals that do everything in their power to get in the spotlight, to get on TV, to be the spokespeople for the Muslim community. Yet when something like this, of this magnitude, happens in their backyard, they were absolutely silent. It was all just a cultural misunderstanding. Nothing to see here. And Nick was just kind of a loose cannon anyway.
The thing is, the truth will always come out, whether you're Muslim, Christian, atheist, whatever. Everything will be restored to justice. Either we come out right now in the dunya, or it's going to come out to bite us in the behind. Imagine what the non-Muslims would think when they see the Muslim community having one of our own do something like this, and we completely cancel him, we completely expose him, and we completely put him to the authorities. That's how you represent Islam, not by hiding these things trying to save face.
After these events unfolded, I disappeared. The community was allowed to believe whatever they wanted to believe. There are many issues with these series of events that need to be addressed, as I've never spoken on it before. And leaders in the community, via their silence in most cases, and by proxy in others, tried to malign me. This incident and the subsequent fallout had a really negative impact on my life. And honestly, I just really want to move on, but I feel like I have to address these issues just for the very purpose of getting it off of my chest. For this reason, I want to address several points that were made by the larger community that were used to defame me and to sweep this issue under the rug. First and foremost is that I did the right thing. There's absolutely nothing that you can say or quote to make me feel otherwise. I have many regrets about my life, but that is not one of them. No God-fearing person thinks that child molestation should be swept under the rug, squashed, or handled in-house, or any of the other demented ideas that people foolishly came up with. Do you think that anyone in America would agree that if molestation is suspected in a school where their child attends, that it should just be left for the board to do their own investigation without alerting the authorities or the community? Maybe in some other country, but not here. But of course, then they bring up the idea that, well, it wasn't exactly molestation, which brings up the second point, which was utilized in this hit piece on muslimmatters.org. Which was that this was just a cultural misunderstanding. The idiots that made this claim, and those who fell for it, want you to believe that at that point in time, with my 14 years of experience in the Muslim community, working in an official capacity as a public affairs coordinator, as a director of outreach, and as an imam for a community that was predominantly from the Indian subcontinent, and with 7.5 years living in the Arab world, that I wouldn't know the difference between a cultural peck on the cheek and grabbing a child by his and forcefully on his face until you left. Let me make this very clear for the author of that article and those who put him up to it. The man was grabbing children's and kicking them on the face. This particular instance, he on the boy's face until he left a. This is not some cultural misunderstanding. I find it disgusting that I have to even explain this to you. The leaders of the community had access to this information. I wouldn't doubt that you had it as well. And if you didn't, you could have easily accessed it from me, but you never reached out. And the reason for that is obvious. You weren't seeking the truth. You were trying to cover for one of your own. I find it a travesty that you're an imam anywhere, and abhorrent that anyone would entrust you with their children. There were pictures. I still have them. The board had them. Community members had them. Yet your leaders, who seem to find their nose into everything that can gain them publicity, were absolutely silent. My third point. How do you know that this was an isolated incident? Well, you don't. The only way you find out is by letting the community know, not by sweeping it under the rug. But ICI thought that they were going to play Sherlock Holmes and Law and Order all in one meeting. Case closed, nothing to see here. But I ask you, when? When does one of these sickos go after just one child? The next day after my sermon, I was at the Islamic Center, and I was on the phone with my headset, speaking to another graduate of the Islamic University of Medina, so there was a witness to this conversation. An Arab man approached me, pulled me aside, and said, "Thank you, I want to thank you for what you did. That was my son." I immediately told him that you should go to the police and report the incident. You don't want this to turn out to be a bigger issue, and then people are looking at you saying, why weren't you protecting your child? We agreed to go to the police station after the prayer, so I picked him and his son up from his house, and we drove to the Irving Police Department where he made a report. On the way to the police station, I asked the young boy about his older brother in the meeting with the board. He was confused and didn't know what I was talking about, and I reiterated the question and I said, your older brother, he met with the board to discuss what happened and they agreed to squash everything. The young boy said to me, I don't have an older brother. Have you figured it out yet? This isn't the same kid. It's victim number 2 out of Allah only knows how many kids. So how many more were there? We'll never know, because some imbecile, or a group of imbeciles, thought that it was okay to squash the issue and let the guy leave the country because the family of one victim reportedly didn't want to bring it to the attention of the police. The father of the boy who I went with to the police station told me that this guy would consistently try to lure kids into the hallway where there were no cameras, and he would try to grab their and kiss them on his face, but his son fought back. So I asked the author of that article and those who were behind it, was that a cultural misunderstanding? Maybe you should have applied that Islamic principle of seeking more information when some sort of news comes to you like this. Now, you could have reached out to me, but let's be clear, you didn't want to know. You just wanted to cover up for one of your own. Point number 4 is that I did this the wrong way. I shouldn't have exposed this situation in a sermon. Now, a lot of people would like to theorize about what they would have done in certain situations had they been in them. But let's be clear, the vast majority of people would have done nothing. As I said before, I have no regrets. And here's a principle that you should get used to that I live by. You don't complain about how somebody does the job that you neglect to do. I should have never been in that position in the first place. I should have come home from vacation, found out what had happened and how the board did the right thing, and then congratulated them in my sermon about how that's what you're supposed to do. As for the sanctity of the sermon, the community tolerates gobbledygook sermons week in and week out about random topics that don't even make sense, politics, or fundraising for some obscure organization that's going to misuse the funds anyway. And instead of focusing on protecting those most vulnerable amongst us, you'd rather focus on my delivery and then argue about the definition of molestation rather than do something about it. I mean, at least I quoted ayat and hadith, which is more than I can say for a lot of your khatibs. I found out on Thursday, I let the people know immediately at the first opportunity that I could, reaching the most amount of people that I could. Let me ask you, if that was your child, how many days would you like me to wait? Everyone in the community had a right to know so that they could check with their children and make sure that nothing happened to them. It broke my heart to look at my son and say, would he have said something? Would he have spoken up? Because these people rarely get caught on the first attempt.
And before we go back to this video, I'm going to quickly read over this news article that goes over the case. It is important to note, however, that this publisher that I'm about to read from, this journal, they have been known to be slightly left-leaning according to fact checkers and media bias checkers. However, they've been known to be very reliable most of the time. Texas Imam ordered to pay 2.5 milli, subhanallah. Muslim woman says that he groomed her after counseling her for years when she was in her teens. The woman filed a lawsuit in July 2018 against Imam, claiming he had coerced her into intimacy with him at a local motel after years of exploitation. Subhanallah, astaghfirullah. Then goes to show that the sheikh remained there until his forced resignation in 2017. He met Jane Doe, began counseling sessions since she was 13 with the family's request. Yeah, the family completely failed, bro. When the woman was 18, Sheikh offered himself as a potential spouse, even though he had already had 2 wives at the point. Okay, well, see, that's the thing. Again, left-leaning part, right? He has 2 wives, so what? Islam allows that, right? Is it legal in the West? No, that's all I could say about that. After engaging in intercourse in the motel, he allegedly cut off contact with her. Says that he's joined a bunch of other mosques and also have been fired after that many times. He also authored a book called Addressing the Taboos of Love, Marriage, and Intimacy in Islam. He himself has been accused of spiritually manipulating several of his followers into secret sham marriages. In May, a security guard at the mosque was also arrested for something similar. Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. He exposes that in the video. The fact that he had all these secret sham marriages might be the fact that the ummah shames polygyny and puts a taboo around intimacy. Why are we making halal difficult when Islam allows polygyny and doesn't put a taboo around intimacy? This ain't Christianity where if you want to be up there like a church or a bishop, you can't have intimacy anymore like a nun because you're married to the church. And the byproduct of that is 250,000+ children being reportedly SA'd in the church from the 1950s. We failed when we stopped following Qur'an and Sunnah.
And under your incredibly short-sighted, unintelligent minds, you would have done exactly what the board did and tried to cover it up. You would have allowed the man to escape justice, and other victims never would have been able to seek it. And we know that there were more victims. We just don't know how many. What you essentially did was create a straw man argument, where you created a fictitious argument that you knew you could win, so you could deflect from the actual real situation. Hey, is a kiss on the cheek molestation? No? Okay, nothing to see here. That's not what happened. The board knew that that's not what happened. The community knew that's not what happened. And the leadership knew that that's not what happened. In the afternoon of the day that I went to the police station with the second victim, after the afternoon prayer, I was confronted by about 24 angry members of the congregation who were upset with my actions. Unfortunately, the confrontation got to the point where I told the security guard that he needed to call the police. Now, I sat in my office, waiting with the security guard until the police arrived and the whole situation was diffused. But while I was in my office with this security guard, he kept pressing me. And at the time, I didn't think much of it, but he kept asking me, do you know who the perpetrator was? Did they tell you who it was? Now, this security guard was actually on the board, and his role was being in charge of youth activities. Now, the disturbing part of this was after I was let go, this guy was actually arrested for aggravated sexual assault in a completely unrelated case. I was worried about the angry mob outside of my office. I had no idea that this guy was really concerned that they had found him out. Now, I will never know this for certain, and I'm not claiming that it is true, but I will never know if the family of his victim was motivated by my sermon to speak to their child and then subsequently found out that an issue was going on, or if the child had heard about the sermon and then found the courage in himself to report what had happened to him. But so many of your leaders would prefer I had shut up, or that the Friday sermon wasn't the place to do it. Point number 5, there was no crime because nobody was arrested. This has to be one of the dumbest comments that people used. And great news to every criminal that ever went unnoticed. No arrest, no crime. Good luck finding a random dude in Pakistan. Never mind the fact that people were actively being intimidated to keep their mouths shut. People have to understand that there was a lot of pressure from inside of the community to keep this thing quiet. The same father who went with me willingly with his son and thanked me for saying what I said later called me, angrily complaining to me about how I caused him so many problems and I made him eat pork by going to the police station, and that now his wife's receiving all sorts of problems because she works at the school that's attached to the Islamic Center. So what happened to the guy who thanked me for what I did? What happened to the guy who willingly went with me to the police station and who angrily told me about the story of what happened to his child? It's clear and obvious that they were bullying people in the community to make them keep their mouths shut. Point number 6, that at the very least I was co-opted by the feminist agenda, or at worst that I was somehow a part of it. This idea was unfortunately pushed by one of my peers who resides out in Diamond Bar, California, and it was believed to be so because the video of the sermon, which was deleted and was immediately uploaded by the community activist organization FACE. And so therefore I must have coordinated these events, or at the very least I was just some sucker being used by alayhi salam. So how did the video get downloaded so quickly and re-uploaded on such short notice despite the fact that the Islamic Center deleted it? Well, brothers and sisters, one of the things that I came to know in the aftermath of this disaster was that I was not the first to know. In fact, I was one of the last. The board knew, the school knew, community members knew, and FACE already knew. In fact, later on, Alia herself told me that they had been made aware of the situation. They were just waiting for somebody to bring it to light. And I'm pretty sure one of the reasons why it was brought to my attention was because people knew I wouldn't shut up. But it makes you wonder why they didn't bring it to any of the other so-called leaders. Then again, we don't know. Maybe it was brought to them, and they just didn't say anything. Regardless, when I brought it to everyone, they still remained silent. And I want to make this point clear. I don't work for anybody outside of God and my family. So if doing the right thing puts me in line with the wrong people that you don't like, I don't care. If the only help I have to save a drowning boy is somebody who you find appalling, and I'm sure you could think of some names, I'm not going to not act because I'm afraid of how you will think it will reflect on me because of who you think I associate with. Point number 7, that I made Muslims look bad. Well, if your Islam is grabbing children's on their face or covering up for those who do, I didn't make you look bad. I merely put a mirror in front of you. And the mirror doesn't make you look bad. It just shows you who you are. And I have nothing to do with whatever version of Islam that is. You want to make Muslims look good? You should have done the right thing. You should have said something. You should have done something. My Islam doesn't care how you think or how anybody else thinks it looks. You had the opportunity to do the right thing. One of my best friends from college, who's a Roman Catholic and knows a thing or two about this sort of stuff, said to me, man, you served up your community a grand slam. And they struck out. This is an issue that anyone with even the slightest bit of cultural context in our country knows, especially because of the history of what happened in the Catholic Church, that we do not tolerate this stuff and we do not cover it up. And we do not move somebody from one place to another. Could you imagine if this were to happen, God forbid, in a Catholic church in today's day and age, and the priest stood up, decided to use the pulpit to expose it in defiance of his superiors? Do you really think anybody in America would be saying, oh, well, he shouldn't have done it in the Sunday sermon, and, he sounded a little bit too angry? What is wrong with you people?
Once again, do you think at the times of the Prophet ﷺ they would stay silent about stuff like this ever? Or do you think they would investigate and take appropriate measures? You can simultaneously be a devout Muslim who loves Allah and wants to honor the religion and also expose things like this. And matter of fact, it's because you're a devout Muslim that honors the religion that you want to expose stuff like this. I really don't know if this is going to make an impact or whatnot, but the least you could do is share this video. And if you made it this far, comment down below #justice. And inshallah, see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.